As part of a writing practice, have always written 1,000 words a day. It's my meditation. It's, some people, I probably should be working out, but instead I sit down and write 1,000 words a day. And
it's not just about the story, it's about opening your life and your personal life and your feelings and giving visibility to those things to an outside world who doesn't know you at all. I mean, it's one thing to share deep in our heart and soul with friends and family. I mean, that's called friendship, right? It's quite another to put that in writing in black and white and say, here, stranger, you can read this. How did you make that step?
I didn't think it was going to be a book about gratitude. I thought it was going to be just a book about how I ended up in this crazy place and didn't know what to do with myself. But the more I read the book, I thought the overarching theme in here is that the gratitude was a huge piece of everything that happened to me during that process.
I'm your host, Mark Good, and this is Remarkable, a podcast focused on people and stories worthy of your attention. And now, today's show.
I'd like to welcome everybody to my Remarkable podcast. My guest is Bunny Terry. We've recorded a previous episode, for those of you who may have listened to it, about Bunny's remarkable journey and being diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer and then chemotherapy and then recovering from that. But the way I got to know you, Bunny, the way I got to know you is I was introduced to you by my daughter, Christina, and her wife, Kat. But the way I got to know your story was Christina said, Dad, and she handed me your book and she said, you got to read this. I couldn't put it down. And so starting that evening when I was in Santa Fe, I started reading your book and I was blown away by your book. But what I wanted to chat about today is a little bit about how did you reach the decision to go from to writing down the things that you were grateful for in your gratitude journal and pivoting and saying, I'm going to share my story. Tell me how that happened.
Well, like as many things in life are, this didn't turn out the way I suspected it would. I have always wanted to write a book. I mean, forever. Since I was a little girl, I used to, get out index cards and type on my parents' underwood. But I also, as part of a writing practice, have always written 1,000 words a day. It's my meditation. It's, some people, I probably should be working out, but instead I sit down and write 1,000 words a day. And I'm going to tell you that there have been periods in my adult life when I didn't do that. And there are even periods in the last couple of years when it's been like 2 days a week or, 1 day a month. It just really has depended on how faithful I was. But at the time that I was diagnosed, I was writing 1,000 words a day.
Okay.
And I was actually writing a different book. So Mark, the original title of this book was going to be not the book I wanted to write.
Oh, no.
And because I was writing a book, a piece of fiction about a woman who was surprisingly just like me. But it was going to be a work of fiction. And I kept writing that piece of fiction in my 1,000 words a day, even after I was diagnosed. But what I found was that the only thing living in my head was this cancer diagnosis.
Of course.
And I knew that I needed to get up. And I was in an industry at the time, in addition to real estate, which I couldn't really do because I was sick. I was also doing a lot of copywriting for businesses that had blogs and social media accounts. And so I was doing a lot of digital writing already. But when I get up in the morning, I have a cup of coffee and I sit down with my Remarkable. By the way, do you have a Remarkable? It's a digital tablet that you write in. That's so interesting.
I know about Remarkable tablets, but it's a funny pun. I never thought about that as it relates to the podcast. Yes.
Yes. So I have one now. I didn't have one at the time. I had, a spiral notebook and I also had my computer. And so either, whichever was whichever worked for me at the moment. And I want to address that in a bit for people who are thinking about writing a memoir. But I would get up and write 1,000 words.
Mm.
And when you write 1,000 words a day in a year, which is about the span of time from when I was diagnosed until the doctor said, you are all clear, after I had surgery and a second round of chemo, in that when you write 1,000 words a day, it becomes 365,000 words, which is really a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot. And so I had this manuscript, except I didn't know it was a manuscript. It was
Well,
just all these pages.
I was going to say what you had, forgive me for saying that, that's presumptuous.
Sure.
What it sounds like you had was 365,000 words of a personal journal, right?
Yes.
Which included a lot of personal stuff. And that's one of my questions is that, in your book, which is a remarkable piece of writing, by the way, and I could tell you've been a copywriter because you write well. I mean, you're not a first time writer at all. And I can,
Thank you.
the 1,000 words a day, I could tell that makes a difference, right? Because you really are skilled. But it's not just about the story. It's about opening your life and your personal life and your feelings and giving visibility to those things to an outside world who doesn't know you at all. I mean, it's one thing to share deep in our heart and soul with friends and family. I mean, that's called friendship, right? It's quite another to put that in writing in black and white and say, here, stranger, you can read this. How did you make that step?
Well, it took a while. As a gift, when my husband and I were first dating, which was in 2015, he gave me a gift of going to a manuscript boot camp with an author that I love, who's one of my favorite authors. And so I take this, we have to send in our manuscript, and I had rewritten a lot, but it was way too huge. And I send it to this group of women, plus this author that I've been a huge fan of for years. And I get there, and I am immediately the least cool person in the room. And she says, after 3 days and after spending thousands of dollars to go to this workshop in Tahoe, at Lake Tahoe, she said, I don't think this is the book you want to write. I don't think this is the book. And I thought, holy mackerel.
Now, was this a comment on the journal, or was this a comment on the piece of fiction that you had been writing?
On the journal.
Oh my
And I was like,
gosh.
but this is what I got. But I have to tell you, Mark, it was a lot. It was really a lot.
Right.
And I came home with my heart broken, thinking I'm not a writer at all. And I put it away for a couple of years.
Wow.
And so that was in 2015, and I put it away. And what I learned is that sometimes when you have such a deep personal experience, sometimes you might need to set it aside for a while and then come back to it. And I continued to write. I continued to do all the other things I do with the written word. And then I went back to it, and I thought, you know what? She doesn't know everything. She doesn't get to dictate my life. And my mom, who is my biggest cheerleader, would call and say, how's the book coming? And I would think, it's not. But I decided I'm also a coach, and I was at this coaching training in Dallas, and the guy said, I want you to decide what your aiming points are for this year. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to finish that dang book. So I came home and I started rewriting, and I started slashing. I mean, you can't publish a book that has 365,000 words. So what people read now is something that has been, I think I took some great stuff out, but what I learned from doing hundreds of writing seminars and reading hundreds of books is that you just got to take out all the extra fluff. I did that, and we ended up with what we have. Thankfully, in 2020, we all shut down, and I was able to get the book edited by somebody else. It came back. We did a lot of rewrites. And so that was the process. That's how but here's it. I didn't think it was going to be a book about gratitude. I thought it was going to be just a book about how I ended up in this crazy place and didn't know what to do with myself. But the more I read the book, I thought the overarching theme in here is that the gratitude was a huge piece of everything that happened to me during that process. And that's when it became a book about gratitude. So when I say you end up in different places than you meant to, I think sometimes you just got to step out and start.
Well, it also sounds like, as I'm listening to you, which I find this very helpful and fascinating, is that I think we have to, which is what you did when you put the book on the shelf for a little bit, is you have to let these ideas marinate a little bit, right? You got to let it kind of, distill and let those ideas that you've committed to paper, let them sit for a little bit, because it gives you some perspective. Time generally does that, right? As we move away from critical events, we have that opportunity to kind of take a different perspective on things, which can be helpful. Another thing, as I listened to you, I remember reading about how Ernest Hemingway would write, and he would write something, and then I think he would either stand up or sit at his desk, and he would read it aloud, and every word that he judged extraneous, he cut it out. And it sounded like you went through sort of a Hemingway-like process, right, of just excising those things that, from your point of view, or maybe your editor's point of view, were viewed as, fluff. You call it fluff. I mean, it didn't contribute to the central thought of a paragraph or a chapter or the narrative, whatever.
Well, and let me tell you, that is a great way to edit, because when I started doing the audio book and I recorded it myself in this little studio we built here at the house, I edited further. I mean, I got in touch with my publication crew and I said, I'm doing the audiobook and there's still stuff we've got. So I think that reading your work aloud as you're writing it makes a huge difference. I will say, Mark, that I could have written a book. I mean, I feel like I've written 30 books, but I could have had something out there in the world a long time ago if I hadn't been so fearful about how it would be received. And I had a writing coach at the time that said, you've got to let go. You're never, ever going to, I'm such a people pleaser. And she said, you're never, ever going to please everyone in your audience. You have to let it go. And that's an important piece for people to know. I mean, if you read what other writers have written about that, it's, you just got to decide that it's more important to put your work out there than not.
But I think there's also a contrast between the guidance that author coach gave you about, buddy, you just got to get it out there, and the first one who said, I don't think you have anything here, right?
I know, it's like, I mean,
that's 180 degrees, right? One who's saying get it out the door, and the other saying don't bother, right?
Right. And don't always think that meeting your heroes is going to end well. That's how I can Liz Gilbert said that. She's the one who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. And she said, sometimes you don't want to meet those people that you're worshiping because you may not be as thrilled as you think. But I had a lot of guidance from a lot of people. That's the other thing, is I was a writer for years who never shared anything other than a lot of blog posts. Because I thought I'm not really a writer. And that's not true. I really am a writer. And anybody who's listening who loves to write is really a writer.
Well, you are a writer. I can say that from having read lots and lots of books and having read your book. I can understand why Christina was so enthusiastic about it, and Kat had read it as well. And the copy they gave me had been well worn. They both it'd been on the nightstand. It's already been. So I know this isn't the best business or revenue model, but your book certainly does have pass around value, right? Because
it does.
People are really sharing it, going, "Gosh, you got to read this," right? But I think also, and that's part of one of the things that I wanted to, hopefully that you would share and you have shared, is that the process of getting what now people can buy when they buy your book, the process of going from 365,000 words, right, to that book was a journey. It was an arduous journey. And I think there's many people, perhaps, who don't appreciate just how difficult it is to produce a product that you're happy to share, right? That tells the story and as I mentioned earlier, it's a deeply personal story because it's one of great struggle. I mean, to get a cancer diagnosis like you got. And I love the way, when you describe it, because I can relate to this, quite frankly, is your attitude was, I'm a healthy person. I'm not worried. What could be, I got a little pain in my side. What could that be? Right.
Right, right.
And it turns out it's stage 4 cancer. I mean, good heavens. That's
I know. I
incredible.
know. Yeah. And I just want for people to be encouraged. In fact, the reason that the book finally got written and published is because I thought if one person reads this and it makes a difference in their journey and it helps them in some way, then it made sense for me to go through what I went through.
Well, I suspect, I mean, I'm not the only person who's read that who would tell you that. I mean, the reason I reached out to you to invite you to be on the show is because the book had an impact on me. Your story, the story of how you wrote the story, both of those things have had an impact on me and really impacted. But I'm sure I'm one of, hundreds, if not thousands of people who have drawn encouragement for that because in a really interesting way, many of us, all of us share challenges in our life and how we respond to those challenges, which is a central part of the message of your book, is key to how we're going to live our lives. Are we going to, allow ourselves to be loved and embraced by our community, our supportive community around us? Are we going to be that for someone else who's struggling? Are we going to be that kind of person? I hope we would be. And then, the gratitude that your dad helped you practice on a daily basis is marvelous. But so when was the book published? When did you finally get it out the door? What date?
January 2021.
January 21. So you're moving into your third year. I have to ask you this because you write so frequently. Have you considered writing anything else?
Oh, I'm always writing something else.
Well, I meant with a view towards publishing something. Maybe I should have said it more accurately.
I have. Last year was a really hard year, and I lost both of my parents last year
sorry.
within 79 days of each other, and there was a lot of caregiving. So I had started a book that was sort of where I come from, and it was a play not only on the location, but also a memoir of sorts about my families of origin and these amazing families that I grew up in particular, my parents. So that's still out there. But as what I've learned is that I've just got to get up and write what's on my heart, even when I'm in the middle of 1,000 other things. I've got this business, there is the money making part that's important because the book writing is not that lucrative. Don't let anybody tell you it is.
Right.
But it really feeds your soul. So, and the other thing that I'm working on is a sidebar to the life-saving gratitude piece. And it's a series I'm calling it the Gratitude Nerd series, but it's like how being a gratitude nerd can change your business, how it can change your relationships. Those are how it can change the way you raise your kids. And that's sort of a smattering. I'm always writing a piece that I think could go in one of those books. It's sort of the chicken soup for the soul for gratitude nerds. We'll see.
That's wonderful.
We'll see how it goes.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, I appreciate again the time that you've shared with me today. And again, like I said, we look forward to seeing you probably late summer, early fall in Santa Fe. And it would only be appropriate that the final thing that I say to you today is I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful for your book. And again, I appreciate the time that you spent with us on the show today.
Well, I was grateful to be here. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you. You take care.
I'm Mark Good. You've been listening to my Remarkable podcast. For more episodes like this, as well as premium content, visit my site, markgood.substack.com.
Humble, pride loses